I would like to remind the space community and the space interested parties that if you politically polarize space, it will harm the space industry in the future. It will hurt the very entities, the very agencies, the very efforts that you are trying to promote. If you pit Republicans against Democrats here in the United States against each other regarding space, regarding legislation and priorities that have to do with space exploration and space business, then that will come back and bite you. Because when your party is not in charge, the other party will be turned against your effort. I've been working in the space industry for over 20 years now, not as long as some of you, but I have never seen it more teetering on the edge of political polarization than I have at this moment, and that deeply concerns me because the outcome will not be good. You might have some short-term wins. Long-term, it means that space will be equivalent to any other issue that is politically polarized, in that some people will fight for it and some people will fight against it, and it will be split along party lines, and that will stall efforts, even have us go backwards at certain times. NASA is moving forward the return date for the Starliner astronauts, Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams. If you remember, they were quote unquote stranded in space because their ride, Starliner, was not qualified as safe enough to bring them back from the International Space Station back to Earth. And therefore, they were left on board the International Space Station much longer than they anticipated and will catch a ride back with SpaceX Dragon. This is not a video about Butch and Sunny. If you would like that, I actually did a whole video about that. Not a whole lot has changed since that video. It's been since September that we've known that Butch and Sunny are going to return back on the Crew 9 Dragon that docked there last year. The return date got moved, and it got moved because of SpaceX. And if you want details, I'm linking an Eric Berger Ars Technica article down below. January 28th, out of the blue, Elon Musk puts up a post on Twitter, X, and it stated, "The President of the United States has asked SpaceX to bring home the 2 astronauts stranded on the space station as soon as possible. We will do so. Terrible that the Biden administration left them there so long." When I saw that, I was floored, because that is an obvious cheap shot at the previous administration that actually had very little to do with the current situation. If you want to talk about the whole Boeing versus SpaceX issue, that goes back more than 10 years. Obama administration, or maybe it was even the administration before that. Like, it goes back way far. It has nothing to do with the current Biden administration and everything to do with the fact that Boeing is having issues with its new spacecraft, and that's a totally other video, again, see above. On that same day, President Trump put out a post on social media saying, "I've just asked Elon Musk and SpaceX to go get the 2 brave astronauts that have been virtually abandoned in space by the Biden administration. They've been waiting for many months on the space station. Elon will soon be on his way. Hopefully, all will be safe. Good luck, Elon." I had been asked about this, to go on record about this, and I turned them down, but here I am on my own video saying that a week later, I cannot still figure out if there was a purpose to those 2 social media posts other than political points to people who are uninformed about the space sector, because they make no sense whatsoever to anyone except people who are not paying attention to space, which is a lot of people, granted, and maybe that's who the audience was. But for people like you and me who follow space, who understand what's going on with Starliner, with the 2 astronauts on board, with SpaceX Dragon, and why Crew 9 got pushed a little bit later, like, you should understand that it has nothing to do with the president, the current president, the president before the previous president, which is the current president, nothing to do at all with any of them. And so my concern here is that statements like these are going to politicize, polarize the space industry. Now, what I am not talking about is what I just slipped upon, which is politicalization. The space sector has always been involved in politics. The space age started because of geopolitics, because of the Cold War era. And so a lot of the growth of the space sector is directly because of geopolitics. Back in the day, it was the Soviets, then the Russians, and now China, and also international partners play a role in geopolitics. But for the most part, like, it's not domestic politics. And NASA being a government entity, NASA gets its entire budget from Congress. And therefore, it is inherently political. And so you can't really say, don't make NASA political, don't make, Space Force political, don't make these government entities political, because they are inherently political. They're under a political system. Because NASA needs to communicate with legislators. NASA needs to keep track of legislation. NASA needs to know what articles, what statements were made by what, political entities or politicians themselves. Like, these are the things that concern me, because it seems like every few days now, we're coming out with another cheap shot at the space industry to make it politically polarized. And that is a major concern, because space in the United States has never been politically polarized in the way that I am seeing it is today. It has always been to the advantage of the nation as a whole that we do space exploration. We've really come together as a nation as a whole, and we may disagree about particularities. We see it tends to be more regional, where certain politicians of any party support NASA because of what it does to their constituents, to their state, to their region. I'm here in Florida on the Space Coast, and you better believe that any politician, Republican or Democrat, would support the space sector because they're here, because this is where their constituents have jobs, directly or indirectly. If you start to make this a Republicans versus Democrats issue, carry that through the timeline. You might get some early wins now for space. You might see that space is getting more money, especially Space Force, I would assume, but space business, regulations, that kind of thing. So you might see these early wins, and that's a good thing, by the way, but what you are likely to see if you follow the trail down a few more years, unless they get rid of the amendment that has the term limits, Donald Trump is not going to be president in 2029. I don't know who's going to be president in 2029. I don't know if it's going to be a Republican, a Democrat, or some other party, probably not some other party, but that's the point, right? We just don't know. So what we want to do is we want to keep the space sector as politically neutral as possible, because we don't know what the future brings. We don't know who's going to be making the decisions in the future about NASA's direction, about NASA's budget, about space business regulations or growth or incubation or subsidies or any other thing that impacts the space sector. We don't know. And what we don't want is a specific political party to turn against the space industry simply because it is seen as a party issue. If you are an American, there is something that you can do to help the situation, which is to contact your elected representatives and tell them that you support the space sector, and tell them why. And please don't make it political. Please don't make it because Elon Musk or because Trump or because some party. Contact your elected representatives and tell them that you support space, and ask them to support space too. That is the best thing that you can do. If people from both parties are contacting political officials on both sides of the aisle to ask them to support space, then we can hopefully get through this tumultuous period in American history where things are so polarized. And I just thought of something. Way back in the day when I was writing a blog, I actually did a study. I looked into whether or not Mars was for Democrats and the moon was for Republicans, because back in the day that seemed to be, we had the first President Bush with the Space Exploration Initiative, that was Mission to the Moon. Then we had President Obama, Mission to Mars, Journey to Mars. And then we had the second President Bush with his Constellation program. And now it's funny because now we have a Republican, and it's Mars that he seems more interested in. So my conclusion back in the day that it was not political, that Moon and Mars had nothing to do with political party. And I think we now see that, right? But if you are curious about President Trump's interest in going to Mars, then please watch this video next.